September 1999. Tokaimura, a small Japanese town bathed in autumn sunlight. A place where life proceeded calmly, away from the hustle and bustle of big cities. No one suspected that this day would go down in history as the scene of one of the most horrific human tragedies. At 10:35 a.m., a terrifying alarm sounded at the JCO plant. A blinding blue flash filled the room. 3 seconds later, one of the men collapsed to the floor. His body, though he didn't know it yet, had just begun a battle that would last for the next 83 days. Days filled with pain beyond description. Outside the walls of the JCO plant, life continued as normal. Children played at school, shops served customers, people went about their daily routines. But for 35-year-old Hisashi Ouchi, time had just stopped. His life was now divided into two parts, before and after. The after was filled with unimaginable suffering that would change not only his body, but also touch the souls of those who stayed with him until the end. Welcome to the channel The Last Whisper. My name is Robert, and today I will tell you the story of a man who faced an invisible enemy against whom he had no chance. A man who crossed the boundary that nature set for human endurance. Stay with me until the end, because this story, though terrifying, carries an important lesson. A lesson that sometimes a small oversight can cost a life. A life full of unimaginable suffering. Tokaimura, September 30th, 1999. The morning promised an ordinary day. Birds sang. The sun slowly rose in the sky. And at the uranium processing plant JCO, 3 workers prepared for a routine task. The plant was not a nuclear power plant. It only prepared uranium fuel for nuclear power plants across the country. Hisashi Ouchi, a 35-year-old technician, woke up that day as usual. He kissed his wife, hugged his son, and ate breakfast. He couldn't have known that he was seeing them for the last time under normal circumstances. He couldn't have predicted that the next time his wife would see him lying on a hospital bed, and the last time as a deformed, skinless body, unable even to blink. At the plant, he met with his colleagues, 54-year-old Yutaka Yokokawa and 40-year-old Masato Shinohara. Their supervisors assigned them a task the company hadn't performed in 3 years. They were already 2 days late with the delivery. Management pressured them. The delivery had to be completed immediately. Faster, you have to do it faster, they heard at every turn. The JCO plant did not have a spotless reputation. In the past, there had been various incidents, including a radioactive material fire that forced an evacuation. But this day would overshadow all previous events. This day would make the world hear about the small plant in Tokaimura, and the name Hisashi Ouchi would forever be recorded in medical annals as the victim of the most severe case of radiation sickness. The procedure they were to perform seemed simple. Dissolve uranium in nitric acid and then transfer the solution to the appropriate tank. This process should have been carried out using specialized equipment to avoid any possibility of a chain reaction. However, JCO management, wanting to speed up the process, ordered the workers to skip standard procedures. Ouchi and his colleagues lacked proper training. They had no idea of the risks their work entailed. They didn't understand the processes occurring in uranium or what exceeding the critical mass meant. They were merely cogs in a corporate machine that prioritized profit and timeliness over safety. Instead of using specialized equipment, they reached for ordinary steel buckets. Instead of a 5% uranium concentration, the standard in this procedure, they used 18% to speed up the process. These seemed like minor changes, but each brought them closer to a catastrophe they couldn't even imagine. Sweat dripped from Ouchi's forehead as he leaned over the final tank, pouring the prepared mixture into it. He was practically hugging the metal structure, unaware that it would soon become the source of his unimaginable suffering. At the moment the last portion of uranium entered the tank, the unexpected occurred. The critical mass was exceeded. At 10:35 a.m., a blinding blue flash filled the room. Cherenkov radiation. This optical phenomenon was just a visual signal of the catastrophe that had already occurred. An uncontrolled chain reaction began in the tank. The room filled with invisible deadly gamma and neutron radiation. Ouchi, standing closest to the tank, received a dose of 17,000 millisieverts, 3 times more than the dose considered lethal. For comparison, the annual safe dose for a nuclear power plant worker is 20 millisieverts. The man's body was instantly penetrated by invisible but deadly particles that began destroying every cell in his body. An alarm sounded. Ouchi and his 2 colleagues, acting instinctively, fled the room. All 3 felt piercing pain, nausea, and dizziness. In the locker room, Ouchi vomited and lost consciousness. These were the first signs of radiation sickness. The prodromal phase, characterized by weakness, nausea, and vomiting. The unconscious Ouchi was transported by ambulance to a nearby hospital, and from there, when the severity of the situation was realized, to the University of Tokyo Hospital, which had the most qualified staff and equipment to handle radiation cases. However, no one could predict what they would face. No one had ever seen a patient with such an extreme dose of radiation. Ouchi's initial condition was surprisingly good. His skin was red, resembling a severe sunburn. His hands were swollen, but he could speak normally. He was sociable, joked with the nurses. One of them, unaware of the seriousness of the situation, even thought the patient would be discharged the same day. Meanwhile, a drama invisible to the eye was unfolding in Ouchi's body. The radiation that had penetrated his body had wreaked havoc at the cellular level. The DNA in his cells was literally torn apart. The chromosomes were massacred, deformed, destroyed, or fused in a way that made them unidentifiable. The man's body was no longer able to produce new, healthy cells. The only thing he had left was the supply of cells produced before the irradiation. That's why he initially seemed to be in relatively good condition. However, this was just an illusory improvement. The second phase of radiation sickness, the latent phase. Doctors, led by Dr. Maikawa, began to realize the severity of the situation when they received the test results. What they saw exceeded their worst fears. They had never seen such destruction at the cellular level. They immediately moved Ouchi to a sterile isolation room. His immune system had practically ceased to exist. He had only 10% of white blood cells left. A simple infection could have killed him within hours. Ouchi's family, his wife, son, sister, and parents, were devastated by the news of the accident. However, they did not lose hope. They loved him. They wanted him to live. They asked the doctors to do everything possible to save him. They had no idea what hell awaited their beloved son, husband, and father. They didn't yet understand that perhaps death would have been more merciful than what was to come. The doctors decided on an experimental procedure, a stem cell transplant. Such treatment had never been attempted before in a case of such extreme radiation exposure. It was a last resort, an attempt to provide the body with healthy cells that could begin repairing the damage. Ouchi's sister immediately volunteered as a donor. Her healthy cells were to be administered intravenously so they could circulate through her brother's body and start rebuilding damaged tissues. As doctors prepared the procedure, Ouchi's condition deteriorated rapidly. His reserve of healthy cells was running out. The third manifest phase of acute radiation syndrome began, the stage where all internal destruction becomes externally visible. Ouchi's skin began peeling off in sheets, exposing raw, burned tissues. Anything attached to his body, medical tape, electrodes, even a simple bandage, would come off with necrotic skin, forcing doctors to abandon their use. He began having trouble breathing. His lungs, also affected by radiation, were struggling to oxygenate his blood. Before being placed on a ventilator, Ouchi was allowed to speak to his wife. Despite the immense effort each word required, they talked for a while. They exchanged declarations of love and reminisced about their life together. Neither said it aloud, but both felt it might be their last conversation. And it was. The last time Ouchi was fully conscious. The next day, his condition was so severe that he required constant assisted ventilation. He was placed on a respirator, marking the beginning of a fight in which he no longer had a voice. 10 days after the stem cells were administered, there was a flicker of hope. Tests showed that his sister's cells had engrafted and began functioning in Ouchi's body. His overall condition improved slightly. The doctors, aware of how extreme the case was, began to hope. So did Ouchi's family. Everyone wished for a miracle, a first-ever recovery from such severe radiation exposure. But the hope lasted only a week. Later, false accusations began to surface, claiming that doctors deliberately prolonged Ouchi's life in order to conduct scientific experiments on him, that he had become a kind of human guinea pig, used to test the limits of radiation exposure. But nothing could be further from the truth. Every procedure Ouchi underwent was intended either to save his life or to ease his suffering. The medical team acted in accordance with Japanese law and the wishes of his family. In the days that followed, Ouchi's body continued to demonstrate just how devastating radiation exposure could be. His immune system, already barely functioning, initiated a final act of self-destruction by attacking its remaining white blood cells. It was as if his body had given up, unable to fight any longer. After 81 days of unimaginable agony, Dr. Maekawa made the most difficult decision of his career. He called a meeting with Ouchi's family and shared what they had all feared. There was no more hope. His condition was irreversible, and each additional day brought only more suffering. Dr. Maekawa told them that if Ouchi's heart stopped again, they should not attempt resuscitation. It was time to let him go, in peace and dignity. Sometimes, the greatest act of love is letting someone you care for stop suffering. With heavy hearts and deep understanding, the family agreed. They signed a do not resuscitate order, knowing it was the most compassionate thing they could do for the man they loved so dearly. On the 83rd day, Ouchi's wife and son visited him for the last time. Understanding the weight of the moment, the doctors carefully removed the gauze from his face so his family could say goodbye. One final glimpse of the man they loved. The face, barely recognizable, altered by radiation and disease, was still Hisashi to them. Husband, father, the man they would always love. That night, as if waiting for that final farewell, Hisashi Ouchi's heart stopped beating. This time, there was no resuscitation. He was allowed to leave in peace, ending a fight he could never win. He died on December 21st, 1999, 83 days after the accident that changed his life forever. But the tragedy at the JCO plant did not end with Ouchi's death. Masato Shinohara, the 40-year-old technician who had stood right next to him during the accident, also received a lethal dose of radiation, estimated at 10,000 millisieverts. That's still twice the dose considered fatal. Shinohara's fight for life was equally dramatic, though less immediately devastating. His greater distance from the tank at the moment of the accident meant the radiation did not destroy his body as rapidly as it had Ouchi's. But his fate was ultimately the same. His body too went through the stages of acute radiation syndrome, battling an invisible enemy no one could overcome. Shinohara died on April 27, 2000, 211 days after the accident. 7 months of suffering. 7 months of struggle that could only end one way. Despite his strength, his body stood no chance against such extreme exposure. The third worker, 54-year-old Yutaka Yokokawa, was the only one to survive. He had been seated at a desk several meters away from the tank at the time of the accident. He received an estimated dose of 3,000 millisieverts, still more than half the fatal threshold. Though his body suffered damage, he survived. For the rest of his life, he dealt with health issues related to radiation exposure. But he lived, and was the only eyewitness able to speak about what really happened inside the JCO facility that fateful day. However, many more people felt the effects of the accident. More than 600 individuals were exposed to radiation, including plant workers, firefighters, emergency responders, and nearby residents. Many still suffer from health problems caused by the event. Tokaimura, once a quiet town, known mostly for its scenic landscapes and historical sites, became a symbol of the dangers associated with nuclear energy. The entire area was evacuated, and for a long time, residents were prohibited from eating locally grown fruits and vegetables due to possible contamination. Fear and uncertainty about long-term health consequences lingered in the community for years. The Japanese government launched an immediate investigation to determine the causes of the tragedy and who was responsible. 6 JCO executives were arrested, including Yokokawa, who, although a victim, had also participated in the procedures that led to the incident. During the trial, all the defendants claimed they had no idea such an accident was possible. They argued that since JCO was not a nuclear power plant but merely a fuel processing facility, they were unaware of the risks of reaching critical mass. They insisted they had never received proper nuclear safety training and that the procedures they followed had been approved by management. But ignorance is no excuse in the eyes of the law, especially when nuclear safety is at stake. All defendants were found guilty of negligence and sentenced to prison terms ranging from 2 to 3 years. These sentences may seem disproportionately lenient compared to the scale of the tragedy, but in Japan's legal system, even such convictions, especially of executives, carry a heavy social stigma. The case also had a civil dimension. In September 2000, JCO agreed to pay $121 million in damages to victims and their families. It was one of the largest payouts in the history of Japan's nuclear industry. Later, the Japanese government took the unprecedented step of revoking JCO's license to operate. The first time such a decision had ever been made in the country's nuclear sector. The Tokaimura disaster transformed the global approach to nuclear safety. Regulations were tightened, and stricter inspections and training procedures were implemented. The story of Hisashi Ouchi and his colleagues became a grim cautionary tale, reminding the world of the deadly consequences of ignoring safety protocols. Especially in the nuclear industry, to ordinary people, the story of Hisashi Ouchi came to symbolize not only human suffering, but also human recklessness and ignorance. It represented the price we sometimes pay for technological advancement when it outpaces responsibility and knowledge. At the same time, it was also a story of the heroic efforts made by doctors who fought to save their patient's life, even when the odds were hopeless. Dr. Maekawa, the chief physician in charge of Ouchi's case, went on to speak at medical conferences for years after the tragedy, sharing the experience and insights gained during that harrowing ordeal. His notes and observations helped improve the medical understanding of acute radiation syndrome and its treatment. Thanks to him, Ouchi's suffering was not entirely in vain. It contributed to our ability to treat future victims of radiation exposure. It is astonishing how long Ouchi's body fought back, despite being so thoroughly destroyed. 83 days, a period in which his body, stripped of the ability to regenerate, died cell by cell. It was a testament to both the resilience of the human body and the horrors that radiation can inflict. It is impossible to imagine the pain and suffering he endured. It was a form of torment that defies human comprehension. Today, many years after the tragedy, the story of Hisashi Ouchi still shocks and disturbs. It serves as a reminder of how small mistakes can lead to catastrophic consequences, of how crucial it is to follow safety procedures, even if they seem tedious or unnecessary, of how thin the line is between life and death when dealing with forces of nature we do not fully understand or control. At the site where the JCO facility once stood, there is now a memorial stone honoring the victims of the disaster. A simple, unadorned slab bearing the names of Hisashi Ouchi and Masato Shinohara. It stands in remembrance of them, of their suffering, and of the lessons we must learn from this tragic story. Thank you for listening to this difficult story. If it moved you as much as it moved me, leave a comment under the video. Reflect on how many times in your life you've ignored safety procedures, thinking nothing will happen. Remember, sometimes the cost of that mindset can be unimaginably high, and think of all the people who work in dangerous conditions every day, often unaware of the risks they face. Those who trust that their employers have safeguarded their well-being, that the procedures they follow aren't mere bureaucracy, but a real shield protecting their health and lives. If you want to hear more stories like this one, subscribe to The Final Whisper and turn on notifications. And always remember, not every experiment leads to discovery. Some end in tragedy that could have been avoided. And the story of Hisashi Ouchi is the most powerful proof of that. See you in the next episode.